A recent HSBC report says that export sector as well as the new economy, the digital economy, could be the next big drivers for India. These are interesting comments which come in the backdrop of our recovery from COVID-19 as well as all the frenzy we're seeing right now in the startup space. Can that really translate into very solid gains for the economy? To speak on this, I'm joined now by the author of the report, Chief Economist for HSBC India Pranjul Bhandari. Pranjul, great to have you on the show. Let's begin with the premise that you have based your findings on in the report.
Yeah, thank you. Great to be here. So, as many economies are building back from the pandemic, some are finding that new drivers are emerging. And I think India is one of them. In the last couple of months, two new drivers, which weren't that obvious pre-pandemic, have now become more obvious now. One is exports. They have been growing quite rapidly. In fact, today, exports are 17% higher than they were just on the eve of the pandemic. They've actually grown 36% quarter on quarter annualized in 2021, the year so far. And it's in a good place. The other thing is the entire ecosystem around the new age technology startups that we are seeing in the economy. And I think there the story is that it seems like the stars have aligned. There's a lot of availability of capital globally. Globally, there's a lot of liquidity. There is appetite to take risk. There are geopolitical changes and a lot of money is coming into India. And in India, we are seeing that the number of startups are on the rise. There's a very good mix of supply and demand in that space. So these are two drivers that I think are worth tracking for anybody who's interested in the growth of the Indian economy.
Let me pick one of them, which I found particularly interesting, Pranjul. When you talk about the kind of impact the digital economy, the new economy can have. The general sense right now is that the whole startup space is definitely growing at a rapid rate, but it is still a minuscule portion of the entire Indian economy. Do you think that can change and the startup space, the digital economy can make a huge difference, be a driver of growth in fact?
Well, look, it's new, it's digital economy, and we can't confuse it with what is old and what is the physical economy. And I think what we can appreciate in the digital economy is the incremental growth, the delta that it brings. Of course, in terms of size, it's just a fraction of what the old physical economy is. And I think that's sort of important to note. I think one of your questions also alluded to the fact that what if it only remains a fringe player? What if it only remains in pockets and doesn't have a nationwide contribution? Well, I think we have some countries to follow on that front. For example, China, if you look at their growth over the last decade, digital firms, e-commerce, and fintech and all of that were big participants of the growth story. Now, of course, they weren't participants alone. They came on the back of very strong physical infrastructure. And that's something which we will need in our economy as well. My sense is that the digital dream will only be realized if the physical economy cooperates. So yes, you can't write away the physical economy at all.
Well, let's talk about that physical economy. In the first quarter of this financial year, we saw 20.1% growth, but that was on the back of a annual 24.4% drop compared quarter on quarter, and a lot of arguments out there whether it really is a recovery or not. What is your outlook, Pranjul, especially on a day when the finance ministry says that the next 3 quarters are going to be good, even if there is a third wave? Are you feeling as enthused by things like high vaccination rates?
Look, I think in the short run, there are a few good things that are happening. The economic rebound from the second wave was far more quicker, sharper than the rebound after the first wave. Also, the economic cost of the second wave was only a third of the first wave. So these are sort of, positive developments. Also, vaccination rates are rising. Hopefully by December, about 50% or more of India's population will be fully vaccinated. And what we've been seeing so far is pent-up goods demand. Once vaccination reaches critical mass, we could also benefit from pent-up services demand, and that could become a driver of growth. The other positive, of course, are the new drivers that we are seeing in terms of exports and the proliferation of new age technology firms. So these are good things. But on the same note, we also have to acknowledge some of the problems in the horizon. And I think one of the big problems we have is rising informality and inequality. My sense is that whenever formalization happens in India in a forced manner, this time it was forced by the pandemic. In the beginning, it's good for growth. Stock markets are up, big companies do better. But over time, if the informal sector suffers and inequality rises, then the overall purchasing power of a large section of people actually falls, and that hurts the fortunes of the formal sector as well. And growth could begin to slow around then. We will not see it now, and that's why I'm saying it's good in the short run, but 2 years down the line, we may have to pay the price for rising inequality. That is something which is underway at this point, and that is something that keeps me a little cautious.
Another factor which may hit us even earlier and which is of concern widely is inflation. We're seeing that also being pushed by supply side constraints from across the globe. Do you see that as a matter of concern, Pranjul? Is that the dark cloud in the silver lining?
Look, things are very volatile, but every story has a different side. To the extent a lot of people want to consume things, but they can't consume it because imports are getting held up because of high shipping costs. At some point, that will emerge as a pent-up demand. So what is slow right now will pick up even more rapidly than normal later. So, this kind of volatility is something, that will continue, and I think we'll have to be careful about it. But just looking through these, some, highly volatile trends, my sense is that the next couple of months, or perhaps even the next couple of quarters, will be good for India. We'll be moving from pent-up goods demand to pent-up services demand. But this is also a window of opportunity in which we have to prepare ourselves, because some of the scars that the pandemic leaves behind, for example, rising inequality and its impact on growth, is something that we'll only see down the line.
Thank you so much, Pranjul, for joining us with that perspective. Pranjul Bhandari, Chief Economist, HSBC India, there with her thoughts on the recovery in the Indian economy. We'll take a